Hello, good morning and welcome back to the Tech23 Impact Circles. And for those new to the circles, welcome. Thank you all for joining today's conversation. I for Robotics and Manufacturing. As is custom, I would like to acknowledge both the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and the Bunwurrung and Woiwurrung Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land where the Slattery's team meets, works and creates. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now today's conversation will be kindly led by Tim Boyle, and he's joined by Steve Atherton, Kate Devitt, Heba Khamis, Ben Kitcher, Michael Sharpe, and Dr. Cori Stewart. I'd like to first make a special shout out to the Tech23 sponsors for making all of this happen. Transport for New South Wales, Main Sequence Cyro Innovation Fund, Oz Industry Entrepreneurs Program delivered in partnership with Pi4 Connect, Addison's, ASX, ANSTO, Curtin University, Cicada Innovations, and Evoke AG for making Tech23 happen. We thank you. Hi, Rachel. So nice to see you here.
Oh, hello, Adina, and hello, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you and to especially welcome our contributors today for helping to make these Tech23 Impact Circles happen. Thank you to all of you who are zooming in to be part of these circles. Please say hello and introduce yourselves in the chat, and you are welcome to share and ask questions in the chat as well. The link to the Slattery's Charter is found there, which is a guide to the behaviour that we encourage at all of our events. Now in its 13th year, Tech23 takes pride in celebrating Australian innovation and is all about amplifying the people and organisations chipping away at the big challenges we face. We've run about 30 of these Tech23 circles in COVID times, and they're all available to watch on demand. And we've still got one more on Friday on mental health, so we hope you can join us on that one as well. And please share far and wide just to help us amplify the wonderful things that are happening in our midst. We're also looking forward to a real life event on the 15th of December in Sydney, where we'll be amplifying another 23 wonderful young companies who are doing great things. We do hope you'll consider joining us if it's possible. Please note that today's circle will be recorded. So just confirming this morning's proceedings, we're going to eavesdrop on what I think will be a really wonderful and informative conversation, and then we'll turn off the recordings and move to a more informal thing, time permitting. If you can stay on the line and connect, then that would be fantastic. So I'm honoured and grateful for Tim Boyle to lead this wonderful topic. Thank you so much, Tim. Over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'd just like to thank all the crew at Tech23 and Slattery's for making this opportunity to highlight the manufacturing and how it can support all industries. I think sometimes we get confused about manufacturing and it gets pushed into an industry vertical, especially advanced manufacturing. But really, manufacturing underpins everything we do and has a role in every single industry that we have. Now, personally, I'm broadcasting here today from the Managed Innovation Centre at Lucas Heights. I'm Director of Innovation and Commercialisation at ANSTO. And ANSTO is really important at the moment because it's one of two government manufacturers. They manufacture nuclear medicine and a range of other products, bespoke products that support global industry. But the nuclear industry in itself is reliant on manufacturing, and there's currently a big policy shift. We're starting to see nuclear technologies become important for the environment and climate change, clean energy, as well as seeing nuclear technologies for sovereign defence with submarines. And we also, the health aspects of nuclear science and technology are also taking off. So it's a very timely discussion. Today I'm joined by a panel of experts across different aspects of the manufacturing ecosystem. I have Dr. Cori Stewart, who's the CEO of ArmHub, which is a translational research centre helping to upskill manufacturing businesses towards Industry 4. I have Kate Devitt from the Trusted Autonomous Systems, CRC, looking at how to put automation into defence applications. I have Michael Sharpe, who is the director of the AMGC, which is the Industry Growth Centre for Advanced Manufacturing, which is probably the biggest umbrella body for manufacturing in Australia. I have Ben Kitcher, who is from the Western Sydney Parkland Authority, and Ben's setting up the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre at Bradfield Aerotropolis, which is a big translational research facility in Sydney. I have Steve Atherton from Southern Strength, which is probably the largest industry cluster for manufacturing companies in Australia. And I finally have Heba Khamis, who is an entrepreneur from Contactile, which is a technology company that supports manufacturing and systems development. So with that brief introduction done, I'd really like to open the floor with a discussion because, as we all know, the pandemic has seen a massive strain on global supply chains. It's highlighted our reliance on offshore manufacturing. We've seen shortages of everything from gym equipment to toilet paper. So for the benefit of those watching our discussion, what really are the emergent technology opportunities as Australia moves towards sovereign manufacturing? So maybe Cori, will start with you.
Hi, it's great to be able to talk to that, Tim. Thanks for handing over. So the ARM Hub, as you said, does the research and industry collaboration translation piece. And what we're seeing in terms of the technologies that are really being driven forward as sovereign manufacturing becomes a prominent part of what companies are doing. We're seeing the push for technologies that really contribute to carbon neutrality because when we're talking about sovereign capability, what we're also talking about is being globally competitive. Because when we build sovereign capability here in Australia, we have to find new markets for it still internationally as well as domestically. We also are looking at companies wanting to onshore into Australia to build capability for the nation. So we can see that a lot in defence, but it's across the industry sectors. And we're also seeing that as a part of the investment attraction pool. So what we're seeing is things that we're still very much a global outlook that we have to take to manufacturing. And so carbon neutrality as a big driver of how industry is going to be able to purchase, connect and find things like traceability is really important. So a good case would be Mercedes, for instance, and it's the rigor it's putting around its purchasing of components and its supply chain and all aspects of the impact on the environment for those pieces, really in the wake of things like the BMW software moment around the exhausting fumes. So I think what we're seeing is that these things are becoming more and more important. We can't ignore them. So to address things like carbon neutrality across manufacturing, we're looking at digital, AI and data science and digital capability, so traceability. So if we really want assurances, blockchain and traceability. If we really want to look at our existing manufacturing or large-scale manufacturing, it's usually things like digital twins, being able to prove out the supply and the use of energy in the systems towards what makes the final components or contributions to those components. So I think what we're seeing is, yes, we're building sovereign capability, but it's global, and we have to think globally all the time. And I think carbon neutrality is really going to drive our ability to compete and sustain our engagement in those supply chains, both here domestically and overseas.
Thanks, Cori. I think there's a strong message there around the future is around the convergence of emergent and scaling exponential technologies with existing manufacturing. So moving on from that, Kate, you're working for the Trusted Autonomous Systems CRC, a defence-funded CRC, and exponential technology sort of drives a lot of the aspects of automation. What's your take on the sovereign capability opportunity?
Yeah, there's probably never been a stronger time to be working in defence industries. It's unfortunately the sort of instability in the region that's unfortunate. So that's not a great thing. But on the back of COVID-19 and with the announcement of AUKUS, the reposturing of Australia as having sovereign capability and needing that end-to-end security sovereign supply chain is going to be really, really good for Australian industry in dual-use technologies and in technologies specifically for defence purposes. The good thing for Australia, we're really well positioned to do this in an ethical and lawful way. So a lot of what we want to ensure with trusted autonomous systems is that they are trusted. And if we don't have trusted systems, they're not going to be deployed, not by our ADF, not by our farmers, not by our marine scientists, not by our manufacturing sectors. They've got to meet safety expectations. They've got to be at the forefront of trust. And Australia prides itself as being a good nation that takes care of people. And that is reflected in our governance structures. So it's important for people in Australia to realise that the ADF doesn't go out willy-nilly, doesn't want uncontrollable machines racing across the battlefield, but they do want really smart equipment, and they do want to be positioned with the best possible kit. And we don't want to put Australian lives at risk, and we don't want to be bad actors on the global stage. So with that in mind, I think autonomous systems in Australia are beautifully positioned. So we've got the mining sector that is a global leader in autonomy, and that's represented in the DARPA Sub-T Challenge. So that's a Subterranean Challenge where Australia just got second place, just got pipped, but is, coming out of Data 61, CSIRO, Emergent, an SME, these companies coming together with universities, with Georgia Tech to produce HoverMap and a team of robotics operating autonomously to achieve tasks in very low comms environments. That is just a signal to the world to say Australia's here, we're ready. We have a huge nation, massive geographic area, an incredible opportunity for autonomous systems across many different sectors, and we can do so safely and trustworthy. And we've got these frameworks. So this is a method for ethical AI in defence. This is a framework to ensure, for example, traceability. So that was what was just, came up with Cori and those digital twins, that test and evaluation process. That's absolutely the principles by which we recommend technology is developed. It has to be done with very rigorous test, evaluation, verification and validation, and in accordance with human values and human intent. So.
Thanks, Kate. I think there's some fantastic take-homes there around opportunities, especially dual sector market, defence, as well as some of the civilian markets, industries such as mining, which can really benefit from the same systems, like crossover technologies. Michael, throw to you now. You've got a helicopter view of the whole sector in your role with ANGC. What are you seeing as the big trends and the big opportunities?
Well, the good news, Tim, is that manufacturing right now is busy. Everyone's busy right around the country. And I think that's great news for manufacturing in general. But today I'm in Tamworth, so I'm in what we call the mobile Zoom studio. And we should have all bought shares in Zoom about 18 months ago, right? So today in Tamworth, I'm visiting a couple of local engineering firms, and they're looking at implementing robotics welding technology. And so one of the great things that more manufacturers need to do is to engage with our great researchers. So today I'm joined by Dr. Phil Commons from the University of Wollongong, who's a leader in robotics welding technology. And the good news about engaging with university researchers is that they're brand agnostic. They don't care what sort of brand robot you're going to buy. Phil and his colleagues are looking for what's the best result they can achieve for your business. So I know at ANGC, we always talk about engaging with our great research minds, but it's even one step better to get out here on the factory floor and connect these people and see what's possible. So there's a lot going on in manufacturing, everything from food production right up to the space industry. And you're right about collaboration and diversifying too, Tim. We're seeing more and more companies looking at adjacent markets. So now with the largest defence budget in our nation's history, that's a great thing for manufacturing because we need to get more resilient supply chains here in this country. So sovereign capability that we all keep hearing about. It's much more than just toilet paper. And so a good example that I often share is a company called Hako Watches in Sydney, a father and son team who manufacture watches, and they make very fine timepieces. They have fantastic equipment for making very intricate little pieces to go into each and every watch. And a few years back, I said to Josh Hako, what about diversifying into other markets? Have you thought about defence? And he said, we'd like to, but where do we start? And I'm pleased to report that just this year, they've actually opened another division of the business called NH Micro, and they're now completing their first space project. And during COVID, during the last 18 months, they've employed an additional 3 engineers. So this is manufacturing growing, diversifying, and becoming more resilient. And we need to see a lot more of that.
Thanks, Michael. I think the Hako watch story is a very, very interesting one. I met with Nick Hako maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and he explained to me how the Swiss watch market had dried up supply of parts, which was eroding his existing business. That's so just right. on that question, so I'll put down to you, Ben, if you have an idea and you would like to compete on the global stage, with your reference around what you're doing with the AMRC and what you're hoping to build there, how can industry get involved in building sovereign capability and upskilling on some of these new manufacturing techniques, which may be well established overseas, but we don't have the expertise and skills development opportunities here in Australia?
It's a very good question, Tim. I think to begin with, we just need to be slightly careful in calling out that, you know, the expertise and capability isn't here. I don't suspect that's the truth, actually. I think the capability is in a lot of cases here. I think sometimes, and coming all the way back to Cori's comment, sometimes it's not necessarily visible to global supply chains. And I think, you know, this is a challenge. So things happen within factories, things happen within secure facilities. And, you know, they are kept out of sight for good reason. Unfortunately, when trying to break into global supply chains and, you know, especially looking at supply chain opportunities with defense contracts coming up, that lack of visibility is killer to be able to enter into, you know, what are already robust, well-known, trusted supply chains. So, you know, what can we do to try and break into those? And I think on the theme of automation, digitization, the key one for me is addressing some of the non-productive elements of manufacturing processes. So some of the you know, the points in time where you haven't got a tool on metal, where you're not assembling pieces, where, you know, you haven't got a screwdriver in your hand. It's actually all the pieces that go around that. So all of the preparation, the work instructions, and particularly the recording of data from the manufacturing process, which assures its quality and its provenance. So applying the automation and digital technologies into those areas has got multiple effects. Number one, it's really easy areas to get higher productivity with low risk to the manufacturing solution itself, i.e. you're not trying to turn the dial up on the machine and push the machine harder in your manufacturing process. You're doing something which is relatively risk-free. Number two, and the thing that goes alongside that, is with a greater detail and automation of that data collection and dissemination around the factory environment, you can actually start to get more data, more resolution of that data coming through. And that can really help when connecting with these supply chains and the demonstration of the capability and quality of what's going on within the facility. So I think, you know, I've always looked at it, and it's been kind of a bit of a secret, I guess, in terms of addressing a manufacturing productivity challenge, is actually go straight to the non-value adding time within there. And I think the digitization and automation tools are very, very effective at reducing that non-value added time, reducing costs, but also demonstrating, if not, you know, actually directly improving the quality of the product.
Sorry, I was struggling to find the mute button. Thank you, Ben. I think that's really interesting, and that thing that the capabilities aren't necessarily not here; they are hidden. And I guess it's then how we reach out and work and build networks of the people who know where the capability is to solve problems. Because we all want to employ the best people, and we can't employ everyone. I can see Kate's raising her hand both on the participants list and virtually. Before I throw to Steve, maybe Kate, would you like to jump in?
I just wanted to back up this comment about the defence supply chain, some of the fact that you don't know what's going on and you might be trying to come in from the outside. A lot of what we do at the centre and a lot of what a number of defence innovation mechanisms try to do is to help SMEs in particular to start to get into that supply chain and to start to have access to the right information to enable them to be successful on projects to get to acquisition. And what we're really trying to emphasize to a lot of defense industries and those who might be thinking about dual use technologies is almost no SME is going to have the capability within its own skill set, within its own employees to manage the Herculean task required of artificial intelligence, robotic platforms that are reliable, and the autonomy, the smarts that are required in the kit. and in order to actually achieve a specific operational task to the safety expectations for deployed use. So you've got to collaborate. You probably do need to reach out, and that can be scary because everyone's concerned about their IP, as they should be, but there are mechanisms. So if you're an SME listening, you're interested in like, how do I get into these sovereign supply chains to be trusted? There's a few different avenues. One is to connect yourself to a prime. So if you look at Boeing with the Loyal Wingman program, it's a fantastic example of sovereign capability driven by an Australian company that also hires and utilises a huge range of Australian SMEs in that supply chain. So that's one pathway, and it'll certainly skill you up and get you experience in how to manage those defence cycles of funding. But there's a lot of other mechanisms. So each state in Australia will have a Defence Science Alliance or a Defence Innovation arm working with Defence Science and Technology Group. They're really good to connect to. In Queensland, it's Queensland Defence Science Alliance. There's also the Defence Innovation Hub, which is fantastic to submit your proposals to Defence, get them evaluated and get funding to be able to start to prototype and start to prove the case of a technology. And almost all of our defence industries will have dual uses for their technologies, because an unmanned ground vehicle can be used to in a search and rescue environment, to fight fires, to carry goods, can be deployed in so many different ways depending on the task that humans have decided is important.
Thanks, Kate. So just on that as well, stretching that, there are tools out there and networks out there to help you find capabilities that may not be in-house, and partnering is often the best way to get access to those capabilities. I'd like to throw to Steve, the chair of Southern Strength, one of the biggest clusters, or if not the biggest cluster in Australia. How does the clustering effect work on helping partner, and what do you see as the opportunities from within the network system that you oversee?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Look, the networks operate basically throughout the country. There's a group of them in the Sydney sort of basin. Obviously, Southern Strength is one. There's i3Net, a terrific bunch of people in the Wollongong area. HunterNet further north. There are other clusters dotted around the place. And if you are an SME, you really should be connected with a cluster somewhere, right? Write that down. If you're writing stuff down, write down. One of the things take away, should be connected with a network, right? Because your network gives you that opportunity to work with like-minded people, perhaps in different technologies, but many of the opportunities exist at the edge of technologies. One person manufactures something a certain way using a group of tools and facilities, and you see, hey, I can learn from that and I can apply some of that to what we do. The opportunities that are out there at the moment really require a serious rethink of the way you approach making things. Don't go into a new opportunity looking backwards and saying, oh, I know how we make that stuff. It's really, how can you manufacture this product in the best way in the world? Write that other bit down. The best way in the world is the only way you want to manufacture something, right? And then how can you work with universities and researchers like Arm Hub, Cori's group? There are the universities. I think, Michael, you mentioned Wollongong University. How can we work with those guys to not only make it as good as everybody, as the best in the world, but make it better? Make it better. There are great opportunities for Australian manufacturers to be able to use the smarts that are in our research and university areas to be able to not only do what others around the world do, but do more. And that comes back to the value that you offer. And Michael, I know you've spoken many times about the value you can offer in your product or service. It's not just, can I make one of these? It's, can I use technology to make it extremely efficiently and make it with features that others don't have, or with opportunities through things like i4 and great data to be able to tag it so that the product that we're offering the world is better than what everybody else is offering the world. So being able to drive those things through a combination of a strong network, the connections to universities and to research groups, and then really thinking, not only do I want to make this product, but I want this product to have more value than anything else it competes with. Then you set yourself apart from the others and you're not competing head to head on something as ugly as price. You're basically out there working on value propositions. And I think that's a lot. That's where Australia has got great opportunity. I've seen it done by many an Australian manufacturer where they've been able to internationally sell their product with great value adds. So I even sold product to China. It took them very little time to copy it, but I managed to sell product into China at one stage. And it was sold on value adds, right? It was sold on the fact that the technology that was there was not readily available. And much of that technology came from the edge of technology groups. For example, there was some commercial dehumidification equipment. We added a whole lot of connectivity to it. So when it's operating in the remote Pilbara, I can operate it from my desktop sitting here in my office, right? Opposed to sending somebody in an aeroplane with a bunch of tools to run out into the middle of nowhere and try to work out what's going on. That's where two bits of technology can come together to make a better value proposition for the end user. So get a network, you need a network. You must have a network. I'm sure you've written that down. The second thing, you must be working with one of the researchers or multiple researchers to make sure that you are taking advantage of the research and the development work that's being done here in this great country. And thirdly, how can I take what I'm going to do and not just make one of these widgets? How can I make my widget that's got 3 or 4 other things on my widget that the competition overseas hasn't even thought of yet? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Steve. I think there's 3 very, very important points there, which we all sure take note of. And I see that Alfredo has commented, Alfredo Martinez called, for those that don't know him, I think everyone in Australia knows Alfredo or will know him at some stage in their life. He's made a point of the importance of clusters, and I can't stress that alone, how important this is. So in our ecosystem here at ANSTO, we based clusters as the foundation of what creates the knowledge destination here. So Southern Strength are an anchor cluster for us. And we've, in sort of the robotics and automation space, we created our own National Robotics and Automation Group, which is a rapidly growing cluster. And by creating clusters, you anchor them where you are. So if anyone's interested in those, please check out Southern Strength and National Robotics and Automation Group. But the second point, which you made, Steve, which I think is really important, is around engagement with researchers and then finding that killer application. So I told Heba now, who's very patient, because you're sort of in the academic space and research space, creating new deep tech that can come together and converge with other technologies to make it more valuable and give a value-added component. So what's your take on the scenario?
Well, I'll actually just take a moment to reiterate a few points that have been made. And I feel like everyone's kind of making the same point, just using different semantics. And the key word there probably, as Steve said, is value. Whether it's value by looking at, the carbon footprint, as Cori suggested, or whether it's value looking at the trust and the traceability in the, whatever it is that you're selling. As Kate mentioned, value is as Australian manufacturers, that's what we offer is that value. And yeah, doing it better, more ethically, more sustainably, looking at product stewardship over the lifetime of the product, even into its into waste management, and end of life and things like that. That's where we really add that value. And if we can do that at a competitive price, then that's obviously also value and speaks to the international market as well. But in terms of looking at working with researchers and utilizing the best, kind of don't just assume you're going to make your thing. The real opportunity now to look at how can we make things in a different way that is going to give us that competitive advantage. And as has been mentioned, that competitive advantage could be, it's made with a zero carbon footprint, for example, and even selling not just to end users who are concerned about things like climate change and carbon. They want to be able to say to their customers that, look, we've sourced this from the most reliable, and ethical and sustainable place possible. And that's kind of what we need to be looking at, these new innovations in manufacturing processes, and looking to researchers to help us do that. Yeah, I don't even remember what the question was, Tim. I'm sorry. I went off on a rant.
That's okay. I think there's some really good important lessons about value there. And I've used this example in the past as well. So a lot of people, like, they value things that are luxury items, but often they're not practical. So the classic example is the Ferrari. It's a two-seater sports car, doesn't have air conditioning. It's horrible to sit in if you're going over speed humps. You know, they're designed for one purpose, and that is desirability. But I don't value that. I've got 3 kids. I do a lot of shopping. You know, there's a reason why the Camry is the most manufactured car in the world, because it's practical, it's large enough to fit a family, it's got a lot of boot space, and it's reasonably priced. And the difference between value and desirability are 2 very distinct things. And what I value as someone with a family is very different from what a young playboy would desire who's looking to show his wealth. So I think there's a very big disconnect between value and what different people value, because it's unique. I'd just like to throw over to Cori, because you're obviously trying to help people create value in their businesses through industrial transformation. What do you see are the next opportunities in this space?
Yeah, so I would really like to capture the sentiment there about, it's really good to see that strong desire to connect with university and university research. Obviously, that is something the ARM Hub does, but the ARM Hub has come out as an independent, not-for-profit for a reason, because we know that that's not necessarily easy to find the right research teams across wherever they are in the country, but also then sometimes to get the kind of quick kind of commercial gains that an SME can kind of experience. So really, the opportunity, say, that the ARM Hub makes available to SME manufacturers and industry broadly across the country is to say, if you've got a commercial thing you need to do now and you want to engage university and research people, we can do it as a sprint. We can negotiate IP, we can do it quickly. And that's why the universities are investing in us, so that can kind of happen outside of an arm's length kind of way. Because if SMEs make up 97% of manufacturing in the country, their immediate priority is their commercial priority. So unlike, say, the larger companies that many of you might experience, they can have an arm of R and an arm of D. And the research can happen in parallel to the development that happens in the company. And that is just typically not the case for any SME or even a startup or a scale up that needs to meet a sort of a technology readiness level. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to go fast in our industrial transformation. We have to find ways to test, trial and adapt and partner into industry and bring talent into companies that can get them on these journeys in the right and appropriate way. So that means that people need to choose their own way. So it could be that you need talent and the ARM Hub, for instance, works with over 40 dedicated research experts from across universities and has them in the ARM Hub midst on projects all the time. And so, yes, you probably won't get one of our AI experts to work solely with you for years. You probably can't afford it if you're a tiny little SME, but you can actually contract them and their team to run a project and get that trusted, independent advice and action. So the other thing the ARM Hub does to make that possible is we have our own in-house mechatronics engineers and data scientists to really try and put the skates on, making sure that these outcomes can be tested, trialed and delivered into a manufacturing environment at pace. So it's all about sort of pace and speed and reach. And I think our industrial transformation environment says that we are in a race. We're in a race globally. We've got lots we need to prove and do. We need to find really smart, quick ways to bring those relationships forward, test and trial the technology, and get our startups servicing our mid-sized industry and our large industry and global industry into those supply chains. So there's nothing more that I like as a project that actually links large companies to your emerging companies and starts to scale both up at the same time. So modernising the manufacturing environment. So we have a lot of traditional industry that is looking to find ways to improve its systems, sometimes completely rejuvenate their systems. But we also have startups and scale-ups, whether it's an IoT, digital twins, data companies that are looking to solve those problems, but they often need particular forms of expertise to just make sure they have a unique value proposition, make sure that they can compete in the market. And the ARM Hub works to really bring those relationships together. So I think we've got a lot to do in our industrial transformation landscape, but we're really well, we're absolutely capable of doing it as long as we can get Australian talent to focus on manufacturing and not focus on maybe other sectors. So if you're not manufacturing, maybe you're a service market. So maybe you're thinking more like, you know, education or government or something like that. But the more attention we can get towards manufacturing and the more talented people want to work in it, and more that manufacturing becomes sexy again, the more opportunity we have for our companies.
I agree, Cori. And the common theme we're hearing here is this convergence of emerging technology and technologies, existing manufacturing processes to make things.
Yeah.
And what I'd really like to highlight is there is a lot of incentive and support from government. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a very, very expensive to engage with the university to get access to technology.
And even
sorry, Cori?
Even technology itself, you know, it's really not often that expensive. We deal a lot with collaborative robotics in manufacturing contexts, and that's across industry sectors. And the cost of the technology is not the challenge. It's really getting the smarts behind it, getting it operating in the ways and translated into the work environment, which is the challenge. And it can be, depending on the sector, the regulation piece as well. But there's so many ways that you are supported to make these transitions. So encourage companies to connect like everyone else.
I was just going to say that there's within the chat, we have within the participant list, there are people from New South Wales government who talk about tech vouchers, innovation connections. I can see Peter Millick is participating, and he leads innovation connections. There's also the CRCP program. So I feel like Stefan just put a comment in the chat. I welcome those people to put their advertise in the chat what they do, because it supports everyone and makes it easier to engage with the university sector to get access to these technologies. I'd just like to throw to Kate, and then I'm going to throw to Ben. Kate?
Yeah, just wanted to back up the comments Cori was making about actually having places to test your kit. So in Queensland, for example, the Queensland State Government's invested in a number of autonomous systems test facilities. So the Australian Institute for Maritime Science in the maritime domain, a lot of connections to universities in Queensland and Australian-wide industry there, and interest from the Navy in doing testing there. Also Cloncurry, that's where Loyal Wingman has been doing test flights to enable there to be long test flights in a very secure environment. So making sure that the robotics equipment we're developing can actually be tested in a variety of contexts, all the way to societal trials like the Google Wing program that has those specific corridors and the SORA approved corridors for test and evaluation of product. Getting those regulatory hurdles covered, bringing the regulators on the journey is a key part of what TAS does, Trust Autonomous Systems does. And I might just put a couple of links in the chat to the emerging code of practice we have for autonomous vessels in Australia to help CASA with those approvals and the exemption process, so that we no longer have these incredibly long periods of time where someone's developing fantastic innovative product, but then can't actually get it out in the field to figure out if it works well or not. And that's a huge preventer of the innovation that Australia has.
Thank you, Kate. And Ben, maybe in your answer, you can answer, when your comment, you can respond to Stefan's question around how Australian manufacturers can improve their ability to sell value and avoid some of the complex, expensive sales cycles against sophisticated global suppliers and global supply chains. So I guess that's a competitive question. So maybe you can incorporate that into your answer.
It will. I certainly will. So I will first off just make a comment on some of the previous responses, just to give myself time to think through Stefan's tricky question. So that would be that I think that a infrequently spoken about challenge that we do need to address as a group and for manufacturing is around the level of support we see locally for the application of advanced manufacturing technologies. And I believe there's currently a lack of investment in capability building from the providers of the technologies themselves. And I'm talking about pieces of machinery, I'm talking about softwares, materials, tooling, etc. I think all of those can be improved, and I think their level of take-up will improve alongside that investment. So giving more certainty to the level of support that industry will receive through the life of that product, rather than it being seen as a quick, sharp sales opportunity, which is what I'm seeing at the moment. So more buy-in, more collaboration from the providers of the technology to get it out there into the shop floor, I think is a really important thing. I think in terms of Stefan's question, we have to make the most of the current opportunity with the defence spend, first and foremost. So the best way to demonstrate the value within Australian supply is through feeding into a program and doing it on time, on cost, and being truly competitive with the international supply chain. And you know, this is a long-term project. This is at the very least a decade, an ability to build out those capabilities, to expand them, to demonstrate globally what the additional value is. And I do think it'll come down to as was previously mentioned, you know, it's governance, it's frameworks, it's quality, it's trust that are the additional values that will be brought. I certainly know that that is the case within the American supply chain, to some extent within Germany as well. It's the trust in those supply chains which really makes them the go-to partners when you're procuring subsystems and components. I think that's what we need to build upon. And here we've got a great opportunity to both create the demand and produce the supply.
Thank you, Ben. Alfredo's asked another question around the difficulties of getting industry to walk through the doors of Australian universities, and wants to understand why that is from an industry perspective, and what can we do to increase the collaborations and the connections. You know, the obvious answer is to get people interacting together in forums like this, and you know, we see lots of matchmaking portals, things like that come along that fail miserably, and that money could be invested in cups of coffee, which would solve the problem much more efficiently. But it's open to the panel. Anyone that has any suggestions around how we can increase business, research, and collaboration. I see Cori's putting your hand up.
Of course. But I think I'll keep it brief. But I think the really important thing that we have experienced in the last 4 years in particular is it's okay to do matchmaking, and it's good. But if you don't give anyone a pathway once they've made the matchmaking, what do they do? And it often falls apart at that point, because you need a lot of expertise on this journey, or a lot of inputs in this journey, like contracting, IP negotiation, facilities, equipment, spaces, expertise. And that's sort of what the ARM Hub has done. Because we do the contract and we build the teams, we have the facilities. It's to try and make that frictionless. So yes, you make a decision about what you need and you do this matchmaking. That could be events like this. It could be any number of other events that we have for industry. I think we do have lots of events sector by sector and across sector in terms of, say, manufacturing capability. But how do people who want to bring those unique capabilities together, what are the tools that they have to do that? And if they go into the university, it starts to, a particular singular university, you have one set of tools to work with that are determined really probably by that university, which could meet a need, and that's fantastic. But often it's a bit more complex. You might want to work with a smart tech company, you might want a little bit of this expertise over here, and you might want to do it in a certain amount of time with a certain amount of resources or other partnerships. Where do you build that opportunity? Like where else can go? So that's what the ARM Hub's tried to do, is try and make that frictionless process, trying to do more for industry so you actually get to the outcome. I think that has been a real challenge in the past. So universities, certainly, I guess, we are headquartered in Queensland, but we work across the nation. But I know, particularly here, a lot of them are right down in the heart of the city. It's really not a place where manufacturers typically feel at home. You've got to get up in the 10th floor of a large shiny glass building before you can have a conversation with someone. Maybe we have certainly made our place in the kind of manufacturing suburbs really of Brisbane, and a lot of our partners across the nation are in those contexts where it is actually where manufacturing happens. So that is also another strategy to make sure that SMEs can access us and feel that it's really a place for them. So they're two things we've done.
Thanks, Cori. I'm going to throw to Heba she's got her hand up. and she's been waiting very patiently. Before, I just want to talk about university IP ownership. I think some of the universities have very different approaches to intellectual property than others, and those that don't demand ownership of everything are the ones that are more prosperous when it comes to industry partnerships. So Jason's made a comment in the chat about the role of how IP is a stumbling block. Where you've got sensitive IP, find the academic that you trust in the organisation that's going to be easier to work with. And I can help people offline. I won't do that publicly, but if one thinks of where the easier to work with universities are, Heba, you've got a question.
Yeah, a bit of an insider perspective here. So I think everything, Cori and Tim, that you said so far is absolutely true. There's a few comments as well that are ringing true as well. I think one of the challenges with working with the university, yes, is IP. Yes, is that every university is different and has different pathways to actually getting to that final collaboration. And that can be a long pathway, as Cori mentioned. And knowing how to navigate that is not something that you're going to be able to know for every university, because they're all different. And also someone in the chat has mentioned the KPIs for the academics are not really there to engage with industry. They're there, and there is a push for academics to work more with industry, but nobody really knows how to do that, who to approach in the university in order to actually get those contracts to happen. Yeah, so you could, if you can navigate a university website and find the academic that fits the skill sets that you need or does the thing that you need, going to them directly, you might have great conversations, but as Cori said, then what? Right? So they themselves probably, unless they've done industry collaboration before, don't actually know what the next steps are. And that can be extremely hard to navigate. And yeah, the IP thing is a huge stumbling block. And as you said, if there was potentially a more kind of nationwide framework on how to handle IP negotiations in these scenarios, I think that would be a great thing for industry and university collaboration.
So I won't talk about the national framework, because there is currently consideration through the University Research Commercialisation Scheme. But I will throw to Steve, who's raised his hand up.
You're on mute.
And I started so well then too. Just working from real life practical examples where I've seen SMEs work with universities to get great economic outcomes through research. Remember, most of the SMEs, more than half of the SMEs, never went to university. So when they approach a university, they have got a lot of trepidation about what they're going to be looking at. They don't know what the university is going to be like, and they're not comfortable doing it. Now, many of the universities I've seen over the last probably 10 years have been reaching out and trying to get to SMEs, but it's still difficult for them because many of them don't know what to expect, and they're scared and they feel a little inferior, and there's a whole lot of emotions go on with an SME when you try to take them to talk to a university or to a researcher. I've seen examples where through a network, an SME has gone to a university literally holding hands with another SME that's actually done that before. And I can cite those examples from University of Wollongong. I can see Zara and Leo are actually in this discussion this morning, where a guy who would never have gone to a university to do research and work, would never have done it, right? But gets to know another SME, and the other SME says, this is actually not that hard. Can I introduce you to somebody? Can I get the process started? So through a network, they've been able to introduce an SME that would never have gone near a university to be able to become part of a research agreement. And I've seen that on 2 occasions, both with the University of Wollongong actually, where basically somebody has come and helped them with that process. The other thing I'd say is the universities in the sort of Sydney basin do tend to attend a lot of the network meetings. They come to functions, and they start to get to know some of these SMEs. And you know, if you've had a cup of coffee and a breakfast with the guys a couple of times, they're not quite as scary as they might be if you're just sort of thinking, I'm going to pick up the phone and ring this great big university, right? For an SME, that scares them to death. They go, I haven't got time to do that, right? But if they say, gee, I'm going to talk to Jimmy, my friend down the road, and I know he did a project with University X, he might be able to help push me along the right path. And, you know, Jimmy usually will say, yeah, sure, I'll take you with me and we'll go and meet whoever we got to meet and get that process going. So remember, most of them have never been to universities, probably more than half hadn't been to a university in their life. So engaging with them is a bit of a scary process, and you need to appreciate that when you approach them. And trying to get them to go to a university, I think lining them up with their peers, with their other network members, is a path that I've seen work. There are probably many other paths, but that's one I've seen work. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. On that vein, when engaging with academics and trying to get the academics to talk to industry, I've never had an academic not want to talk to someone about their research and what they do. But sometimes the ability to listen to what others do can be limited, and it's about breaking down that barrier by finding the common ground. That's what good industry liaison managers do. I say to Michael, what are your thoughts?
Oh, exactly, and you know, as you know, Tim, it's a privilege to get out on the factory floor and meet with the business owners and see what's going on the ground. And as I mentioned earlier, to come out here and be in Tamworth today and with Phil Commons from the University of Wollongong, we're talking about robotics welding. So we've done this in other regions around the country. And then what comes from that is that the researchers are able to see what the issues are on the floor, take that problem to the university, work with their teams, come up with a solution. And then we have delegations from, and we will from Tamworth, we'll have a delegation of manufacturers here come to Wollongong to see the research then in action. And it's real world stuff. Because I strongly agree with Steve, you know, a lot of our manufacturers are fantastic world leaders of what they do, but they haven't necessarily been to university. So they definitely do see our unis as a foreign country, and they certainly speak a foreign language. So the more we can get this collaboration going on the ground, I find regional manufacturing is really on the march at the moment. I was in Narrabri yesterday, I'll be in Gunnedah this afternoon. It's really moving, and the biggest issue is just getting people. So for me, that's a good problem to have. They just can't get enough staff at the moment because it's such a busy time. But I think it's important to know what good looks like. And so we launched the Manufacturing Academy, and maybe we can put a link up to the manufacturingacademy.com.au. And I was able to interview some leading manufacturers around the country, and they've shared their experience and shared their knowledge on that platform to enable others to learn from their experience. I also wanted to touch on, Tim, I think I mentioned to you last week around manufacturers in Australia are, you know, generally very good at what they do, making things, but not necessarily so good at selling things. And so I see a lot of opportunity if we can talk on sales and marketing. A couple of examples I'll just share with you is a company down in regional Victoria called Davo's Fencing Clip. They featured last month on Landline on the ABC. And Nicole Davidson and her husband work and live on the farm. Nicole developed a better way of making a fencing clip as part of her process. She now exports around the world and purely sells on Facebook. And so she's worked out how to get the best times to put the right material on Facebook. But because of that, and I'm sure the pandemic had an impact on this as well, more and more people were coming to her page, and she sells around the world from their farm. So they've benefited from government grants to build capabilities and increase the manufacturing on the farm, and that's enabling that small business to grow. Another great example I always share is Norweld up in Cairns, North Queensland. They make ute traces back at Toyota Land Cruisers, and they're looking at robotics welding technology to help their business grow. But one of the directors went home on a weekend a couple of years ago, and his daughter said, "Hey, Dad, could I put some photos up on Instagram and we'll build an Instagram page for the business?" From that one Instagram feed, that company now exports, which they weren't doing previously. And so some of the ways that universities can help, not just in the fact of robotics welding or other technology, but I encourage everyone out there to think about the sales and marketing in the business, because there's researchers out there that can help you to find the key words and the key markets to sell into. And so there's government assistance available to help you with that. But we've got some fantastic research minds that can help in the sales side of your business to help you to grow. Norweld now exports to the United States and Saudi Arabia and other countries just from having the right hashtag keyword on their Instagram feed. For example, hashtag Toyota, hashtag ute tray. And as we know, Instagram is completely free. The outcome of that is that they now have their customers sending photos of their Norweld ute trays from all around the world, and they post their customers' photos up on their Instagram feed. So I'll encourage you to have a look at Davo's fancy clip on Facebook and check out Norweld on Instagram. I really think we need much more focus on selling in this country.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think there's a real highlight of opportunity there of how manufacturers can engage with universities. And it's not necessarily just research. University innovation hubs, and Nandan here at ANSTO, and the Linfield Connect, and Selena, who's also on the chat here, the Collaboration Hub, Linfield Collaboration Hub. Yeah, these are all centres that are open to the community to join, to get access to commercialisation, commercial infrastructure to help you scale and explore new markets. And then from then, you can work out how you can engage with the research sector. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle, which we haven't really talked too much about. Ben, what are your thoughts?
I'm thinking it's unfortunate that as soon as the topic of universities comes up, everyone puts their hand up and wants to weigh in with an opinion. And I apologise first off to our academic partners online. So yeah, we've talked about some of the barriers in the first instance to someone going to a university or even having an academic come out and have a look at a process. I think the second barrier is when you get through that one, you basically convert your potential into a project, but then that project might end up with some form of disappointment on both sides. So on, that ultimately a solution might not end up being implemented or implemented to the same extent that it was expected it might be. And I think at this point, we just need to make sure that actually we're aligning expectations and language around what we think the outcomes will be and how they will be implemented. And the key one there is to make sure we don't come up with a solution which is great for the individual instances, but actually is repeatable, robust, and able to be easily put into production by the industry partner. So developing it to the right level, taking it to the right level of maturity before it's then transferred over. And I think, certainly from some instances that I've seen with electrical powertrains, these have been developed by some great researchers at the University of Nottingham who were developing fantastic power electronics and electric machines for electric drivetrains, but they very, very rarely ever made it into production and to be sold ultimately, because it wasn't being developed to the right level of maturity within the lab. And so we need to just make sure that we align those, and where possible, we create the tools. And I'm sure Cori and ARMHub are doing this, create the tools so that they can be matured to the right level in accordance to the right quality systems and processes, so that then they can be taken onto the shop floor much more easily.
Thank you, Ben. I'm conscious we've been talking for an hour, but I'll throw to Kate for some final comments.
Just to back up the conversation about marketing, there's some amazing work in the universities in entrepreneurship, connections to sort of the ecosystem of funding, acceleration, venture capital, and so forth. I'll just give an example from my experience between Queensland University of Technology and MIT. They really try to click together both students and academics with how to consider their student experience rolling into becoming perhaps an SME and connecting with that global standard of, startup, scale up, what kind of materials do you need to get out, how to put together a pitch deck. And universities are increasingly having things like the Foundry, which is like little sort of shared co-located spaces to bring students together with their inventions, and to sort of think through some of this work. So I think industry may not realize as well that universities are a really different place than maybe what they might imagine them to be, if they have any imagining at all from like 80 years ago, that students are coming in, and the way that curriculum's being scaffolded is often around real world problems. So engineering courses often have either capstone or first year focus on actually solving a problem. So the issue is not about a specific widget or a specific technique. It's around, let's actually try to address something that's a problem in the world or something we'd like to change, and then think about all the different disciplines you might need to bring in order to resolve that problem. And if students have that mindset, then they might be easier partners for industry because they already come prepared to have an impact in the world.
Thank you, Kate. So conscious we've been talking for over an hour now, and we are in the Tech23 home. So I'll pass over to Rachel to advise on what we're going to do next.
Oh, Tim, it's fantastic. I could listen to this for hours. It's been great. But what we're going to do is stop recording. I want to thank all the contributors for sharing so much of their knowledge and so much happening in the chat as well. This is a really rich and wonderful circle. So thanks to all involved.